The other thing is the word it has been such a blessing and such a curse over the years, and I've gone both ways, year by year, month by month, day by day, of like being so grateful for it and really owning it, and then other times just wanting to disavow it and just be done with it.
I'm always curious about the naming convention because, you know, we live in this YouTube world. We live in this world where we want more clicks and engagement, just so people can discover the work that we're making. Yeah. Even have a chance to have it discovered. What was that exercise like, thinking about the titles for that book?
It's funny because I actually wrote probably half of that book with different titles in mind. And then it was after I had written about half of the draft, I wrote the article, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And that just blew up so hard and so aggressively that to me, it was just obvious that that should be the title of the book. You know, it was I had a conversation with my agent at the time, and she was like, this should be the title. Like, let's be honest, this should be the title. Yeah. And so maybe try to fit that in, make that chapter 1, and then, you know, edit everything else to kind of flow from it. And that's what I did. But in terms of your question about titles, so this actually ties back into the e-commerce thing, which is when I was studying marketing and sales, trying to get these tiny, crappy e-commerce businesses to work, I studied a lot of copywriting. And at the time, I was kind of grossed out by it. I'm like, these headlines, they're so cheesy, you know?
Clickbaity.
Yeah, very clickbaity.
Yeah, it's the BuzzFeed era.
It's like the weird essence that can solve your, you know, hip problems for good. It's just, your soul kind of dies inside.
Discover the fountain of youth.
Yeah, you just want to crawl into a hole.
Yeah, when you feel dirty
when you write some of this stuff. But it was those skills that when I started focusing on virality on Facebook, that they kind of came back into use, because it's like, okay, I need like titles really, really matter on this platform. And so I need to just hit a home run as often as possible. And so I started a copywriting practice, which was, you know, in copywriting, they teach you, don't just write one headline, write like 20 or 30 headlines, and then take the 5 best and then iterate on those, and then take the one best, you know, because the first headline is never going to be the best one. Yeah. And I started applying that to title. So every article I wrote, I would come up with like 20, 25 different titles. And that turned out to be a really, really good exercise, because it just got me very, very good at writing titles and understanding what gets people's attention, what gets people to stop and think for a second. And so by the time, you know, the Subtle Art article came out, I've been playing that game at a pretty high level for 3 or 4 years. And it just logically translates into the book world as well.
What were some of the alternative titles that you considered that were runner up, or maybe top 5?
I remember there was one, it was something like Happiness is Not Enough, or Stop Trying to Be Happy. One was like, I remember I had one that my editor really liked, but he was like, nobody's going to buy that. I had one, it was, the title was just ... and then you die. You know, there was some dark humor mixed in there, but originally a lot of the titles revolved around happiness, because that was kind of the hot topic back then. It was like every book coming out was, you know, the happiness equation, or the happiness hypothesis, or the key to happiness. And I wanted to do something that kind of went counter to that. It was like, you know, happiness is not enough, or happiness is overrated, or stop trying to be happy, something like that. So a lot of those ideas are still in the book. Like, you get to chapter 2, 3, 4, 5. Most of it's about how happiness is overrated, but it's all now framed through a not giving a fuck lens.
Yeah. Do you see this more as a franchise then?
No. There's definitely been a lot of questioning over the years about that. Obviously, my publisher very vocally wanted to push me into, you know, subtle art of not giving a fuck for kids, subtle art of not giving a fuck for pregnant women.
Yeah.
Subtle art not giving a fuck for teachers. You know, let's just spin this out. Let's do chicken soup for the soul for
Right.
non-fuck givers. I looked at that and I'm like, okay, that would be, yes, it would be very lucrative. I just couldn't really bring myself. It just wasn't creatively interesting.
Yeah, it's
to
a
me.
sellout, to a
It is.
cop-out.
It's totally a sellout.
Yeah.
It's you're turning it into, you're turning it into like a corporation at that point, which is fine. Like, I mean, it's like nothing against Chicken Soup for the Soul or other book franchises that have done that, but like I just realized that like that wasn't really gonna make me that happy.
Yeah. I mean, that's maybe a good segue into this idea that I ask a lot of people about, which, this show is called Behind the Brand.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about brand, like what it is, why it's important. Let me ask you what your definition of a brand is, and then tell me what the Mark Manson brand is.
It's a great question. And I'd love to talk about the F word.
Yeah.
Because this is something that I still struggle with today.
Okay. You can drop bombs here. It's all good.
No, but I mean, in term as it relates to my brand.
Yeah. Because it can be polarizing.
It is very polarizing, and on a lot of different dimensions. But to answer your question, okay, what is a brand? I would say a brand is how the associations that people identify you with, both consciously and unconsciously in their mind. It's both what they associate with you intellectually, like, oh, Apple makes computers, they have great phones, but also emotionally. It's very clean, sleek, professional, sophisticated. And then what is the Mark Manson brand? It's really funny you're asking this because my team and I were currently in the early stages of a brand pivot. And so we've been asking this question a lot ourselves. And I just wrote out, I'm not even kidding you, like 3 days ago, like the core, like the pillars of the Mark Manson brand. So the first one was relatability. I think it was smart, funny, relatability, and non-judgmental. So it's life advice that is intelligent, it's well-researched. It's also delivered in a funny, entertaining manner. It's very relatable. It's like a guy in a bar just talking. I'm not a professor. I'm not like a billionaire.
Not a PhD. You don't have your psychology degree.
No letters after my name. And it's non-judgmental. Like there's a lot of life advice out there that kind of moralizes, or gets political. And I strongly believe that to help the most people, you should kind of zoom out as much as possible and be as compassionate as possible. Like understand people come from all different walks of life, and I don't necessarily know what's best for them.
That resonates with me too. That non-judgmental part though, does that come from experience? Like maybe there was a time when you had a lot of judgment, religious upbringing or, whatever your...
Well, so this ties into the polarization thing. So first, the answer is no. I've always been a very non-judgmental person. And I think that's, in my personal life, that's been a very good thing. In the current media environment, it's gotten very difficult for me because judgment polarizes audiences. It creates very intense engagement in fans on one side, and it creates very intense criticism and engagement on the other side.
Right.
And so being non-judgmental is actually kind of a suboptimal content strategy in the 2020s.
Yeah, you're sort of Switzerland.
Exactly.
You're neutral. You're neither this nor that.
And who gets excited about Switzerland? Like,
right.
Everybody get, you get excited about Russia or Israel or Gaza. Like nobody's like, out protesting in the streets over Switzerland and their neutrality. So that's been a little bit of a challenge, or it's just raised a lot of questions. The other thing is the word it has been such a blessing and such a curse over the years, and I've gone both ways year by year, month by month, day by day of like being so grateful for it and really owning it, and then other times just wanting to disavow it and just be done with it. People even today, even after, like, there's so much content out there, there's so many books, there's so many, like, you go on Instagram, there's so many copycats, people saying, you know, here's not how not to give a to this day. It just happened last week. You add to the title or the first line of a piece of content, and it immediately, the engagement goes up like 20-30%. Like, it just the people who like it love it, and they really, really engage with it. And I'm very fortunate that I was one of the first, or the first person in my industry to like really lean into that word. Like, I kind of own that word in my industry. And that is, it's a cheat code, right? Like, I should leverage that, and I do. On the other hand, there are costs that come with it. So there's obviously a lot of people don't like it, and they judge and criticize and send angry emails. Yeah,
there's a whole part of America that would probably just say, just tune out. Like,
yes,
can't do it.
But there's also some more subtle costs, which I didn't realize until, maybe a few years ago. For instance, I get, and this is not complaining. I'm just.
Yeah, this is a function of the decision you made.
Yes.
This is why branding is so important.
It's super important
to talk about. Yeah,
because it's insanely important.
Things cut both ways.
They do. And you have to have a strong brand, you have to polarize. And you have to be aware. And I think this is, I guess, if I was to make a complaint, I was not fully aware of the dimensions that I was polarizing on. The dimension I was aware of was, like, when I put fuck in the title of an article, it goes more viral and I get more negative comments.
Right.
I can live with that because I want the virality, right? What I didn't realize, especially once I had a best-selling book out and, I was doing lots of media, there are, so anything corporate related, like, they don't come near me.
Right.
So I have peers who have books that have sold 1/10 of the copies, and they are loaded up on the corporate circuit, doing conferences and
keynotes
and consulting and like making crazy amounts of money. And I just never get those calls. Another example is media, right? There's some publications that just, doesn't matter how popular I am, they just won't talk to me.
Yeah.
And then there's a certain, I think there's a little bit of a stereotyping that happens with people who are not familiar with my work. When they're first exposed to it, they assume that it's, I mean, it is a little bit lowbrow, but I mean, they assume that it's not as thoughtful and researched as it is. I often hear from people who say, when I first saw your book, I thought it was just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
And then after like 6 people told me to read it, I read it, and wow, it's actually really smart. Like, that it's actually really smart phrase kills me a little bit inside.
Yeah. That's it's interesting you say that, because sometimes I hear that from comedians.
Yeah.
They'll say, like, like back in the day, Eddie Murphy, he's just like full of profanity.
Yeah.
Hilarious, but like, you look at someone like Nate Bargatze, or Bargatze. I just went to see him at Hollywood Bowl. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't swear.
Yeah.
He's still afraid of his parents' judgment.
Yeah.
But that's part of his shtick, right? But it's like, no, I get it. It's tougher to not use the kind of language that get people juiced up.
Yeah.
So I can understand that misjudgment. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been, I mean, obviously overall it's net positive, and I'm generally happy to be associated with it, but it's been, again, I wasn't aware of some of the costs or drawbacks that would emerge later on in my career.